And welcome back to this Thursday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. Here's another item from our winnable war moment. Remember, we talked at the yesterday, we talked at the top of the hour about how 62% of the American people are convinced that in one way or another, God was involved in bringing the universe and human beings into existence. Now, 37% of them believe what you and I believe, that he created man as he is 10,000 years ago and the universe as he is 10,000 years ago. That's what the Bible teaches. That's what we believe. Another 25% believe that God used the process of evolution to pull that off, but that evolution was not a blind process, didn't operate through the random collision of atoms like our Darwinian friends want us to believe, but that God was directing and guiding, and he was the one that was responsible for every advance of life on the evolutionary scale. Now, I think the theory of evolution is just horrible science. It's terrible geology. It's terrible biology. It's terrible genetics. Violates everything we know about the laws of science. But nevertheless, some people believe it, and they think that God directed each advanced step. And only 17% after all of this indoctrination, this must be so frustrating to our poor atheist friends, so frustrating that they've only been able to convince 17% of the American people to agree with them that God had nothing to do with it. Even though they dominate academia, they dominate the public education system, they dominate media, they dominate the political world, they dominate every network in America. And what I mean by network is the business community, the academic community, you name it, the political community, their view is dominant there. You get landed on like a falling safe if you say anything that questions evolutionary orthodoxy. And despite all of that, they still only have 17% of America to agree with them. And a study here done by the Center for the Study of Global Christianity at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, South Hamilton, Massachusetts, says this: by the year 2020, only 1.8% of the world population will be atheist. This is down from 4.5% in 1970. It dropped to 2% in 2010, and by the end of this decade, it'll be down to 1.8%. Now, you've got agnostics. Now, the word agnostic is from two Greek words, one of which means to know and the other of which means not. So it means I just don't know. I'm agnostic. There could be a God. There might not be. I just don't know. They're not atheists. They don't disbelieve in God. They just haven't made up their minds yet. They were 14.7% of the world's population in 1970, but will be less than 9% of the population by 2020. So we get to 2020, there's only going to be about 10 or 11% of the entire population on Earth that does not believe in God or even has questions about whether God exists. Now, according to this study, Christians in 2020 will be 33% of the world's population. Islam will be 24% of the world's population in 2020. So that gives you a little bit of perspective. 1 out of every 3 people alive in 2020 will be a Christian, and about 1 in 4 will be a Muslim. The Heritage Foundation's got a good piece today that I read. They have a family fact of the week, sort of like the Fisher factoid of the day. They have a family fact of the week. And what this piece by Leslie Grimard points out is the positive impact that active spirituality, when a family is spiritually active, the positive impact it has on them, on their family, their children, and their world. It has a positive impact, according to the Heritage Foundation, on adolescent behavior, on teen academic achievement, and on maintaining an intact married family. This is all correlated now to an active, vibrant spiritual life. And the measure they use is regular religious observance. Now, let me ask you this question. Do we want teens to do better in their education? Absolutely. What does Heritage Foundation say? One of the keys to that is it is religious observance. Do we want intact marriages and families? Absolutely. What's one of the keys to that according to social research? It is regular religious observance. Do we want teens to behave themselves? Got another story I read this morning about another one of these flash mobs just besieging, ambushing this convenience store, just ripping everything off, 20, 30 teens, rip everything off the shelves they can carry and then vanish into the night before the police can get there and arrest anybody. Do we want teens to behave better? Heritage Foundation says regular religious observance is a key to that. Do we want healthier families? Do we want happier families? Well, regular religious observance. Families who frequent worship services are more likely to enjoy lower levels of conflict, increased marital stability, and greater parental involvement. So it's not just good for teens, it's good for adults. They enjoy better physical and mental health, decreased depression, and they have a lower cancer mortality risk connected to the worship of the living God. They're more likely to volunteer and make charitable donations. Now, one of the points that this article makes is there are about 1 in 6 Americans now today, about 17%, 18%, who say that they have no religious preference. They have no denomination or religious tradition that they prefer. And you'd think, and that's gone up dramatically since 1990. In 1990, it was only about 6%, 7% of the population had no religious preference. And so you think, well, this is terrible, terrible news. This is a dramatic rise from 7% in 1990 to 18% today. This is terrible, horrible, no good, very bad. But what this writer points out is only 10% of those with no religion report that they are atheists. Our percentage is higher here in America, and 15% report being agnostic. So what that means is that 75% of the people that say they don't have a religious preference, of this 18%, 75% of them, that would be about 13 or 14% of the population, say religion plays a somewhat or very important role in their lives. So faith, despite what you hear, has not vanished in America. And that means, ladies and gentlemen, we've got something to work with. We understand, as Senator Ted Cruz. I found out, by the way, today that Senator Ted Cruz is now following me on Twitter. But as I played the soundbite for you from Senator Ted Cruz, he understands that religious revival is crucial if we're going to reclaim this country. Senator Rand Paul has said exactly the same thing. We've got to have revival. The problems we are facing are deeper than any politician, any political party can solve. And so this information indicates there is something to work with. And ladies and gentlemen, we don't just have faith on our side. It's not just blind faith. Here we've got social research that says that regular involvement in vibrant Christianity, vibrant spirituality is good for your marriage. It's good for your health. It's good for your emotional well-being. It's good for your mental well-being. It lowers your risk of cancer. It's good for your kids. It's good for their academic involvement. It's good for their behavioral and lifestyle choices. That's all social research. So it's not just blind faith on our part that Christianity works, that Christianity is good for you. We've got the social research to back it up. Here's another piece on the winnable war front on the issue of the sanctity of human life. This is a Washington Post ABC poll. Well, let me start with this one first. This is how bad things have gotten in Washington, D.C. The CBO, this is the Congressional Budget Office. You know, they're the budget office, Congressional Budget Office. So they go out there and they make budget projections on everything from Obamacare to defense to whatever. Now, some enlightened dimwit in Congress asked them to run the numbers on what would happen, what the budgetary impact would be if we passed the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. This would protect the life of every child in America from 20 weeks of gestation onward. That's the age at which infants in the womb can feel pain. And I think if I don't care who you are, I don't care what your belief system is, there is something desperately, pathologically wrong with you if you aren't troubled with the reality, according to medical science, that an abortion after 20 weeks inflicts terrible, excruciating pain on a vulnerable little baby in the womb. If that doesn't trouble you, that doesn't bother you, there is something pathologically wrong with you. But anyway, somebody asked the CBO, run the numbers on this, and they said, well, that's going to be expensive. If you protect the lives of these precious babies, it's going to cost the government $225 million over the next 10 years if you allow these children to be born instead of dismembering them in the womb. And this is because of the health care costs and because of the expenditures in welfare programs. It's going to be $225 million. It's going to cost the government, and the government, there's no government source of money. It's us. It costs taxpayers $225 million because they're going to have health care costs for the indigent or whatever. They're going to have other welfare costs and so forth. Well, how about this as a suggestion? Instead of killing children, why don't we get government out of the health care and welfare business? What are they doing in there in the first place? If you want to save the government $225 million, just don't spend the money on health care and welfare. I mean, it makes perfectly good sense to me. Let's give these children a shot at life, and let's simply get the government out of activities they've got no business being in the first place. Now, one last, and this is a piece of great news, again, on the winnable war front. This is according to a poll by the Washington Post and ABC. So this is these are obviously left-leaning mainstream media outlets. And listen to this. This is a piece by Julie Alperin and Scott Clement, dated today. By a margin of 56 to 27%. That's 2-1, ladies and gentlemen. By a 2-1 margin, more Americans say they'd prefer to impose limits on abortions after the first 20 weeks of pregnancy rather than the 24-week mark established under current law. Another 10%, that puts the number up to 66%, volunteered they would prefer to outlaw abortion in the United States altogether or limit it earlier than 20 weeks after fertilization. Now, the 24-week period, that's kind of standard. It's not in current law. This has got nothing to do with the law. That has to do with Roe v. Wade and all that bilge. But 24 weeks is considered to be the age of viability. Now, we know, as a matter of fact, that babies can survive at earlier. Children have survived, been born at 21 weeks. Now, the chances are they're fighting long odds, but they have survived. We've done surgeries, in utero surgeries, on children that are 20, 21, 22 weeks along. And here we find that the majority of the American people are with us. They are in favor of protecting unborn children after the age of 20 weeks of development. That's a winnable war moment for today. Back in 2.